Hey, it's me, Lucas Roth, CFA, CPA, and Realtor. When people are buying their first property, I always float this idea. What if you bought a multifamily, lived in one unit and rented out a few units, instead of buying a single family home? Now, the answer is always that they have thought about that. It seems like a good idea, but it's too risky. Okay. So in this video, I'm going to explore, is it really riskier to buy a multifamily property than a single family home? I'm going to answer that question, and then I'm going to explain how that answer changes depending on how long you're going to own that property. Okay. First things first, let's talk about the 3 reasons why people say it is too risky. Okay. I always have 3 reasons for everything in case you haven't noticed. First thing, time. So people say, I'm too busy. I can't be handling being a landlord. It's too much. 2, I am not very handy. I can't fix things. So therefore I can't buy a multifamily property. And 3, the tenants may screw me. Okay. They might not pay. And if that happens, then I'll be stuck with paying the entire mortgage myself, and they might mess up my unit and that kind of thing. Okay. 3 perfectly valid reasons or considerations to keep in mind, right? So what underpins all of this is this one, which I think is an incorrect assumption. The assumption is that a single family home is no risk. Okay. So if I buy a single family home, there's no risk. And people think this because their parents have done it, bought a house, their friends have bought houses, everybody they know has bought houses. So they say, okay, everybody else has figured out, obviously I will figure it out too. And that won't be a problem. That will be easy, no risk. Okay. And the corollary to that is multifamily is the opposite. Their parents didn't do that. They don't have friends that do that. So they just feel like, well, it's very risky because there's too many unknowns. Okay. So what I'm about to do is blow your mind right now and explain how single family has the exact same considerations as multifamily, okay? So time. Just because you don't have a rental unit doesn't mean that your single family home won't ever have an issue. You will stay at home waiting for a plumber at some point. You will be replacing or fixing the furnace and all those kinds of things, right? That happens with single family homes, just like it happens with multifamily. Expertise, same thing. If you can fix up a home and manage your own home, then you can manage a rental property, okay? There's not going to be any crazy differences, right? There's windows, there's doors, there's toilets. It's the same stuff, okay? Don't be intimidated. And then this last thing about tenants don't pay. This is something we need to explore, okay? So in my own personal experience, I've owned units for many years now, and I've had hundreds of months of rent paid to me, okay? Hundreds. Now, over that course of that time, about 1.5 months of rent were not paid to me, right? People were getting to the end of their lease. They just stopped paying the rent. I had to kick one person out, so about 1.5 months out of hundreds. Okay. So it's a fraction of 1% of the time that people don't pay. Okay. So it is illogical. It's irrational to say, well, that's what I'm focused on, and I forget about the 99% of the time that people do pay their rent. Okay, you don't make decisions based on the 1%. You make their decisions based on the overall picture, and the overall picture is the vast majority of time the tenants pay their rent. Okay, so and besides, if you're comparing to a single family home, it's not like the answer is to buy a house, and so therefore you don't have any tenants. I mean, that, then you have no income. You're guaranteed to not get any rent payments. At least when you have multifamily, you'll get the rent payment 99.something% of the time, right? So now what I've just done basically is just said, okay, single family, that's not a no risk scenario. Multifamily, that's not very risky. They're actually very, very similar, okay? But if I had to pick one, which one is more risky? That's when that question that I mentioned at the beginning of the video comes into play. Depends on how long you're going to own it, okay? So for the first year, a multifamily property is a little bit more risky than a single family, okay? So on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say single family is like a 5 for risk, just like the middle of the road, I guess. And a multifamily is like a 6, slightly higher. I say that because you are going to spend more time. There's like more elements that can go wrong. Instead of having 2 bathrooms you're in charge of, maybe you're in charge of 4 or 6 or something like that. And then, yeah, maybe you are learning some lessons. Maybe you don't educate yourself. You don't screen the first tenant. And then that very first tenant doesn't pay you. And you're right on the edge of being able to make your bill payments. And so it throws your financial situation all out of whack. That can happen. It is an actual possibility. However, you can do many, many things to mitigate that risk as far as the tenants. So first year, you're learning, you're getting up to speed, and you're not doing it. Let's say you're not doing it well. The risk is a little bit more than single family, okay? But 2+ years on, once you've learned those first few lessons and you get into the habit of being a landlord, your risk versus the single family flips, okay? So single family will always just stay at like a 5. The multifamily depends on how many properties you end up owning and stuff like that, but it'll just keep going down and down and down, right? So let's say it's a 2. And the reason why I say that is one of the things that made me think of this video is I recently had a conversation with a woman who, she bought her first property at the same time that my wife and I bought our first property, right? She bought a single family house. We bought a multifamily property. Just talking to her recently, she's saying, I kind of want to invest in real estate, almost maybe, but it's just way too risky. I just can't do it. It's too risky. She kept saying that. And it's like, okay, well, just like I say, at the very, very beginning, maybe multifamily, you take a little bit extra risk. You take more onto your plate. I do agree with that. However, fast forward 5 years or 10 years, right? Look at our situations now. My wife and I kept buying properties. We've built up several different income streams from all the different units that we own, right? Whereas she still owns the same house and relies solely on her job for an income. So who is more risky at this point? She is much more risky, because if she were to get fired or become disabled or some disaster might happen, there's no safety net. There's no other income, right? Whereas us, something happened to us, we at least have rental income that's coming in, that's covering housing payments and covering some of our living costs and everything else. So at this point, we're way less risky, right? So that's why I say this will flip, right? Single family is less risky right at the very beginning, but then it becomes multifamily that will give you that foundation to build financial security on top of, okay? So thank you for watching this video. Hopefully it wasn't too preachy. LucasRoth.com is my website. If you're watching on YouTube, if you could like, subscribe, hit the notifications button, that would help me out. Have a great day.